point is to develop yourself during your life so that when you come to the point of the end of your life, you're prepared.
Right.
Your mind is prepared. You've accomplished enough meditation or whatever your practice is so that when you pass during that transition, your mind is open and calm. Your mind is focused on whatever the practice is that you do, and that your heart is open. That's the bottom line. That when we pass, we are in a state of awareness and open-heartedness. That's what you're training for in your lifetime. It's not like you wait until,
Julie
I'm
Rogers
old now, I better
is
practice.
The founder and director
get
of
ready.
TLC Transitional Life Care, a Vajrayana Buddhist nonprofit organization dedicated to the education and support of individuals and their families during the end-of-life transition. The program is centered in the SF Bay Area and Southern Oregon and is available online and via Zoom. Julie is a writer, author, mother, educator, administrator, and has been a caregiver, hospice volunteer, and a Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist for almost 40 years. In speaking with Julie, she helped impart in me an affirmation of a belief that we can never be grateful enough, and to show that gratitude by giving and giving truthfully in alignment with our beliefs. I suggest listening to this episode with a loved one and encourage you to have conversations around the topic of death so that grief becomes less taboo and less of a thing to avoid in each other. So in doing so, we can help each other, in the words of the late Ram Dass, walk each other home.
I feel like everything we can do to give deepens our experience in life. Whatever it is that you do or can do, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be very simple.
Greetings and welcome to the Quake City Portal. Over 25 years ago, Julie was surrounded by a string of deaths. These were the deaths of her friends, many only in their 30s at the time, and then years later, she experienced the death of her husband. The close succession of some of these deaths compelled her to ask why there wasn't much information available to address the needs of families and individuals dealing with death. With encouragement from her Buddhist teacher, Venerable Gyatrul Rinpoche, Julie Rogers later founded TLC, Transitional Life Care, in 2014. Years earlier, she had written a concise instructional manual about preparing for the moment that would eventually come for all of us, titled Instructions for the Transitional State, published by Vimala Treasures. To summarize, it aims to offer guidance through the dying process from a Buddhist perspective, but is intended for those of any persuasion. It also includes information about working with the secular aspects of documentation and paperwork, things that families are too often burdened with while in the process of grieving. But its focus is on how to offer compassionate care to the person dying. A checklist showing how to properly care for those who are dying is provided, as well as supporting material about how to hold space during the transition of a loved one or anyone. In other words, the manual is dense with valuable information that we often overlook until it's too late. So, since death is an inevitable part of life that causes us to picture the worst of our fears to the point that we bottle them up until the very last moment, is there not anything that we can do to help prepare ourselves for when that time does come? Is there anything we can do better to help each other grieve and process loss, rather than avoid it altogether? We hope that conversations like this bring us closer to acceptance and encourage us to feel less resistance when we do eventually transition out of our bodies and into whatever you believe is waiting to greet us in the afterlife. And with that, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Julie Rogers of TLC Transitional Life Care.
I never planned to do anything like this. And I found my teacher. I was so lucky to happen upon him in 83 and immediately felt compelled. It was just this connection was so obvious. So I started traveling from where I was living in Mount Shasta, California, to Ashland, Oregon, which is about an hour or so away up north, to the center to be able to hear him teach, and did this for 3 months and then decided to take refuge. Even after 3 months, I had really no idea what I was getting myself into, and that it would be like a lifelong thing. Like, pursuit's the wrong word. It's like commitment and journey and exploration. It's very big. But he was definitely the right teacher for me. And so I became really involved in the center at Tashi Chuling's Center for Buddhist Studies, which is just south of Ashland, Oregon, in the Siskiyou Mountains. And at least 25 years ago, several of my friends in their 30s died of cancer. And usually you think, old people die of cancer. But those of us who have had a range of people pass in their lives know that's just our sort of illusion. And as they kept dying over a period maybe of 2 years, I finally went up to Gyatrul Rinpoche and I said, I feel like we need some kind of end of life or death and dying. Nobody said end of life then. It was death and dying because of the great work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she'd started opening everything up in that way. And I asked him, and he turned to me and he said very adamantly, "You do it." And I was like, "What?" Me?
Yeah.
And I was involved in the center as a volunteer for many, many years, but I couldn't imagine what I would do or how I would go about it. And then I procrastinated very successfully for some years. And then a friend of mine, Laurel Hansen, decided she wanted to take hospice and bereavement training. And she said, "We should do this together." And I said, "Yes, let's do this." And this is after I'd already written the first version of that manual, Instructions for the Transitional State.
Wow. And
that was written, God, I don't remember when my first friend who died, it was like in the early 90s maybe. Yeah, it was in the early to mid 90s. And I was living in Oregon at that time, and his partner was here in San Francisco Bay Area, and that was during the AIDS epidemic. And my friend's partner was dying of an AIDS-related cancer. And we had all, a little group of us who had gone even to high school together, had all become Buddhists. And so my friend Dick said, "I want you to please, if you wanted help," and I do, I really want to help, I can't do anything, I was so frustrated. He said, "Go to Rinpoche and ask him what we should do when Rob dies." So I did, and I wrote a bunch of notes. And so we had this 11-page document that would sit on the kitchen table, and Dick had arranged this really wonderful schedule. So people inside and outside the Buddhist arena were coming to help caregive, just friends. And so it sat there and everybody could read it, and it really helped, us, guide us. And then over the years, people, as I said, kept passing. And then my friend Laurel said, "Let's take this training." And I thought, great, because then I can really supplement or include some secular information, not just the spiritual, because my aspiration was to make a very short, concise manual that you could use at the bedside, that people who are or aren't Buddhist could use, and that would be helpful when you're in this state of shock, when someone's dying that you love. You're dealing with anticipatory grief. You're dealing with a huge amount of pressure, inner and outer, to help the person and also deal with your own emotional things that are coming up. So something really short, so it's like ABC. Do you do this? You do this. You do this. There's many, many great end of life books now, and in the Vajrayana tradition, and people should read them if they feel inclined. But this is more like, I joked with a friend, Lama Bruce Newman. He's blurbed the back of the book, and I was joking with him, and I said, "Well, how about if we just call it Dying for Dummies?" He laughs. He's like, "I don't think so." I said, "I don't think so either," but it's a nice chuckle. But it's just very concise for that purpose, so you can just go to the page that says what to do, and you can follow through. And there's things in there that some people would use and some people wouldn't, so you just take what you want to use and, not use the rest. And then Laurel and I were going to start a program, and we'd already made some outlines of what we imagined we could do. And then not that long after that, she got pancreatic cancer, and she died.
Wow.
And then my husband got liver cancer, and I just thought, this has to happen. I can't put this off any longer.
Whoa. What is the time span of all this happening? Was it years?
Oh, it was years.
Like
over years.
Less than 5 years, or
which time span are you referring to?
When all three of your friends, two of your friends and your husband passed away? Was it?
Well, that was within about a couple of years.
Wow.
I guess.
So it was a lot happening around you.
It's been pretty nonstop for a really long time. But the whole trajectory really goes back 25 years at least. This is coming slowly. One of the things Rinpoche said to me, he gave me 3 sort of suggestions or pieces of advice or mandates, which were Vajrayana tradition.
Okay.
Anyone can come. Slowly, slowly. Which is what he would say, do something, do it slowly, but, there's a continuum to your work, Don't get all worked up and have this big flash in the pan inspiration and then let it go. And slowly worked really well because I was procrastinating.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for the program itself to get started, but the whole feeling and idea for it and the manual were done years before.
Wow.
The manual was published in, 15 years ago.
Whoa. Okay.
And so, this has been going a while. And then, when my husband got the liver cancer, which he did not die from, by the way, a really good friend of mine, Ian Villarreal, and I were talking, and he said, you could start a nonprofit. And I'm like, no, I don't want a business. I just want to create a group of people that will support each other, And I was thinking for our community at Tashi Chuling at that time, the Buddhist center up north in Southern Oregon. And he convinced me somehow. I'm not sure, because I am so far away from a business person. That's not what I do at all.
Right.
And so we started having events at Oregon Dorje Den in 2015. And the first event was just introducing the idea, and it was like, there were a lot of people. I was so surprised.
Okay.
Yeah. And at that time, Oregon Dorje Den was doing some advertising for us by way of making announcements on their website or their newsletter, which that's ended just recently. But so that's how we got people to come in, so they know about it. And so we started doing that, and then that went on for 5 years. And we've hosted many, many Vajrayana masters and teachers and hospice workers and doctors.
Wow.
And coming up in August, I'm really excited. We're having an event with 2 very wonderful professional green burial
nice
guys. Yeah. Ed Bixby and Seth Vidal, who Ed's like the head of the Green Burial Council of the United States or of America or something, and they're both just really terrific. So they're going to go over all the different ways you can have alternative internment, green burial, just there's a lot, not just that. So that's going to be fascinating.
Wow.
But it's just a huge arena of different things that need to be addressed. The secular things like what you do when someone dies in terms of their paperwork, how to prepare the documents that need to be prepared, how to shut down all of their worldly affairs, either before and mostly after they pass, and then all the spiritual observations, and particularly according to Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, what you can do to support them when they realize they're dying, as they're dying, and during death and after death. Traditional, like, of course, rituals and so on, but just very common sense things like how to create an environment for the person dying so that they'll relax, which is the most important thing. And protect their privacy and allow them to do things they need to do and want to do, not allow them, assist them.
Right. The writings in the pamphlet that you provided was the manual.
Yeah.
Was that written with the guidance of your teacher? I'm just curious because in reading it, I'm wondering what kind of research was done during that time to come up with all the material for it. Was it widely known, or was it easy to find, or was it through word of mouth mostly?
Well, the first version of it, which was only 11 pages, was pretty much what Rinpoche told me, and I wrote it down. And then that became merged with what I learned from other teachers, from our events, from hospice and bereavement training. A lot of it is what I've been learning along the way. I've been learning along the way just like everyone else.
Right.
And I learned a great deal in hospice and training. And what's interesting is you'd think, oh, Vajrayana Buddhist end of life, that sounds so exotic or something.
Right.
It's all very common sense. Hospice care, which I've done also because I was a caregiver for about 20 years, working with elders, hospice patients. I did 10 years of work with developmentally disabled adults, which was just hands-on care, not end of life, but there's a lot of similarities when you're dealing especially with or working with someone who's very developmentally disabled. You have to do a lot of things for them that people would normally do for themselves.
Right.
But in terms of the end of life stuff, a lot I learned, after organizing these events, then attending them and taking notes,
Yeah.
And then at the end of the book, of course, there's all the information about the secular there's a checklist, for instance. This is what you need to do when someone dies, down to how you contact the post office, how you shut the mail off, how you deal with the credit card. These are the different things you have to do. Not so much how you do it, but what you need to do. And I found that when my mom died in 2001, which was very sudden and shocking, I don't think I could have gotten through the executorship that I was suddenly in the position to do unless a friend of mine hadn't given me a list of what she did when her mom died. So a lot of it, is word of mouth,
right,
kind of. But it's all this information has been with the guidance of Buddhist teachers. And it's also been edited by my friend David Johnston, who's now, oh my God, he's almost 90. Still practicing, also, he's a therapist. I asked him to edit, read it, look it over. He'd had so many teachings, so it's been really, really looked over.
Wow.
That said, I feel it needs to be revised because it's been some years, and I've learned a lot since I wrote it 15 years ago.
Right.
So that's on the books or on the desk. But yeah, it's and then there's also just a couple of very concise but amazing teachings by Buddhist masters in here. So you get a really well-rounded sort of helper. It's a helper.
Right. I have so many questions about the manual, but I'm very curious as to how you develop such a devotion to this type of work. You mentioned that you were a caregiver and also in hospice, and then you formulated this manual. So was it the practice was it with your practice in mind that you did all this work? Because I know how Tibetan Buddhism is, based on what I've read, is very, they put death out there as more of a center for existence. To meditate on death is to basically live more of a, I guess it's another tool to live a more of a mindful life. I guess I might be fumbling that a lot, but
yeah, you're stating yourself.
Yeah.
Awareness of impermanence is one of the foundational contemplations of Buddhism, as far as I understand. And even when you decide to become a Buddhist, take refuge in Buddhism, take it as your path, and you decide to really go through the series of different practices that lead one to the next, through this trajectory, so that you can purify your mind. That's a way to put it. But also to sort of remove the obstacles that we have in our minds that keep us from having a very pure perception of the world and phenomena. I'm sure I'm not the right person to talk about this, but there are preliminary practices that you do, and the first thing you do is contemplate what's called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, which means turn the mind to spirituality, or religion is probably not. Religion, that word is used in a lot of different ways, but they are contemplations on the preciousness of the human rebirth, the truth of suffering, the truth of impermanence, and karma. And these contemplations are really like a bedrock, I think, for the practices and methods that one does to go through these different stages until you reach some of the higher teachings. And of course, meditation is key, But the contemplation of impermanence is really important, obviously. And our habitual patterns and habitual tendencies always lead back to this grasping to the self. And that creates, duality, the whole self and other. I mean, oh my God, right now in the world, the duality that we are experience in our minds is driving us farther and farther apart. Us and them, This is a whole huge kind of series of teachings that one would contemplate on discerning this grasping to self and selfishness. We tend to be very self-absorbed. It's normal. It's not like someone's a freak because they are self-absorbed. This is how human beings kind of relate, with the world and phenomena.
Right.
So, yeah, impermanence is really important. And so, for me, personally, of course I lost my grandfather when I was very small. It was all hidden. The children didn't go to the funerals. But I remember being taken to a cemetery when I was very small to be where his ashes were. And I remember how amazing it was for me. It was this incredible quiet environment, and the statuary and the beautiful garden-like quality of this particular cemetery we were at. And I don't know, I had this connection somehow. And then when I was about 12, my best friend's brother died. He was about 14. Wow. And the way that the family worked with it, they were deeply religious. None of them cried at the funeral. I cried my eyes out. And I was really struck by this young, and it was an open casket. So there is this, the first time I'd seen a corpse, and it just blew my mind, the whole thing. And then, over the years, you'd lose more and more people. And it's funny because a woman who's helping me with TLC, she's an administrative assistant. She's also an astrologer. And I don't know much about astrology, but she said, "Do you mind if I say some things about your chart?" I said, "Sure, why not?" She goes, "Well, I'm looking at your chart, and it's amazing because you are perfect for death and dying."
Wow.
I started laughing. It's like, I'm perfect for death. Well, isn't that convenient? Because I'm heading there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just have a propensity to sort of, I don't know.
Right.
The practice that I do in my own personal life is one that was done in Tibet, of course, called Should, which is a very profound, powerful practice that is very good for slaying the ego, slaying all of that. And I feel like I'm being sloppy. I'm not saying this very well. It's also associated with end of life too. So I don't know why, but this has always kind of been coming to me. So you were referring to a calling.
Right. Yes.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't expect any of it. And I never expected to found a nonprofit or be the director of one, or one about, focused on end of life. Yeah. It's been a learning process. It's been a training process, and it will always be that way, I'm sure.
Since you started the nonprofit, have most of the people that come to you or TLC for assistance or guidance, are they mostly in the Buddhist practice, or from all walks of life?
Well, mostly in Buddhist practice, because up until very, very, very recently, like this year, we really didn't have a way to reach people outside the Buddhist arena. We were doing small events at Oregon Dorje Den Temple, where we hope to continue to do events sometimes. And so our mailing lists were for people that were associated with that. It was never, ever intended to be exclusive at all.
Right.
But, we haven't been able to afford to do big advertising. We're actually looking right now for someone who can volunteer to give us marketing advice. A couple of little things have come up lately. Word of mouth. It's really been very, very grassroots and has organically developed. But we're open to, of course, anyone from any walk of life, religious or not religious, but we will be continuing to keep it in this context of Buddhist view.
Yes.
So like recently, because of a creative writing class I was teaching, one of the people in the creative writing class asked me if I would give a talk on bereavement for the San Francisco Village Senior Center. Certainly not Buddhist oriented,
Right.
But because this kind of thinking is so down to earth and practical, it can help anyone, and of course bereavement and grief, it's universal. Everyone suffers with this.
Right. And I'm glad you said that too, because in reading the manual, I couldn't help but think how completely opposite it is from everything that I grew up with. Having a teacher, in the manual it states having a teacher by the body, that was related to the dead body, and the relationships that person had. That's what I'm referring to as the teachers, right? Whereas in the Catholic belief, it's crucifixes and the Virgin Mary, statues of the Virgin Mary. I mean, people that you've never even met before, and it even goes to the words of the teachings of the Buddha versus, the stuff that you read in the Bible. A lot of it, to me, even when I read it at a young age, was that it was a lot of answers. Buddhism gave a lot of answers to questions that I didn't even know that I was asking. Like all of suffering comes from the want of anything.
Attachment and desire. Yeah.
And whereas, in Catholicism, and I'm not trying to knock Catholicism for anybody that believes in it, but as for me personally, the answer was always through somebody else other than myself.
I think I'm following you. I mean, I have great respect for all the religions.
Right.
And I think being sectarian is totally counterproductive to the unity of human beings and separatism. But there are different paths for different people.
Right.
And, there's parallels, of course, between Catholicism and Buddhism, deeply steeped in ritual, both paths. In Catholicism, if you're dying and you're fortunate enough that your priest is nearby, your priest would come and give last rites, which you could sort of say is kind of parallel if you were fortunate enough to have your Buddhist teacher or Lama nearby. Often your Lama is not nearby, but you would like to hope that you have a community of practitioners, or your religious community, people could come and sit with you and support you in your practice or in the path that you've chosen.
Right.
I don't know very many people that have actually had their teacher with them when they die.
Right.
It's kind of rare. However, the point, and also with TLC, the point is to develop yourself during your life so that when you come to the point of the end of your life, you're prepared.
Right.
Your mind is prepared. You've accomplished enough meditation or whatever your practice is so that when you pass during that transition, your mind is open and calm. Your mind is focused on whatever the practice is that you do, and that your heart is open. That's the bottom line. That when we pass, we are in a state of awareness and open-heartedness. They call that bodhicitta.
Yeah.
In Buddhism. That's what you're training for in your lifetime. It's not like you wait until, I'm old now, I better practice and, get ready. Right. I can tell you, I'm 65 now. My energy is, I can see it's, slowly diminishing, and so I want to be able to practice now. And the longer that you're able to, be seated in the path that you are, the more able you're going to be able to have a graceful transition at death. So it's really, there are things, of course, you can do if you suddenly discover I'm dying. You can definitely do things that will assist. But the most important is to practice when you're able to, when you have the energy, when you have the drive, the time. Making time, that's a hard thing. Our lives are so distracted and packed with work and family and all of these things. So it's like you're trying to practice meditation or whatever ritual practice that you do, and you're also trying to study so that you can support yourself in putting into the, let's see, spiritual activity.
Right.
That can even be just being a good person, you know, being patient, practicing virtue within your family, within your, you know, with your friends. And so it's kind of an expansive thing. It really is. It's like a path,
Right.
like a way of life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That makes me think of an idea that I've realized lately, was that people just need, like you were referring to earlier, people need their own time. People need space to grow in their own way. And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do you provide space for people to practice in their own way while trying to spread the news of something like TLC, end of life care, in a way that isn't kind of like, hey, you know, I'm preaching to you that this is the way to do it, and the way that you've been used to is, because what I've noticed is that the more that you try to change people, the more that people are just resistant to whatever it is you're trying to say. Well, and that's based on my experience.
There's no proselytizing,
right,
at all.
Right.
You know, if how do you're right. We can't change anyone. People have to change themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that even sounds daunting. Oh my God, I have to change myself. I need a makeover. That's enough to make you stop in your tracks. I think what it is if you have interest in spiritual things, then you would go, you know, you'd expose yourself to these things. Go to Buddhist teachings or whatever teachings that you have interest in. Study them, read them. My God, on YouTube, you can see anything. There are so many amazing Buddhist teachings and other types of spiritual teachings online and on YouTube. So you can just, you know, expose yourself. I mean, that's how I met my teacher. My friend said, do you want to meet a Buddhist guru? I said, sure, I've never met a Buddhist guru. So I went, and there, you know, I had this connection. Very unexpected.
Right.
But there's so many different ways to approach spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many teachers now in the West. And so I think you just have to put your toe in the water. You know, explore, read different things. I think most important is to open your mind to the possibility. Mm-hmm. Because if we're caught in our own boundaries, we have self-imposed boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're caught in that and we're thinking, oh, I need to make a change and I don't know what to do, and we get all uptight and wound up about it, it's going to be more difficult. Mm-hmm. I think it's more like relax. Imagine what it is that you want in your life. Mm-hmm. You know, give it some thought. Sit down and sit. You know, people are, I think, nervous about meditating. Meditating seems overwhelming. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just really a lot of it is sitting down, just sitting there. Sit. Watch your breath. Mm-hmm. You know, relax. Mm-hmm. Allow your mind to open. Art and writing and things like that can allow these sorts of things to develop too. So I think there's a lot of approaches, but basically I think we need to just explore.
Right.
But also, for instance, TLC, we have a really resource-packed website. And there's different things that you can find there, and one of them is our film archive, our video archive. Mm-hmm. We've edited and produced, I think, 21 or 22 videos of past events. So you can actually watch these different teachers and hear them teach. It's focused on end of life, but in Buddhism, that touches on all kinds of things.
Right.
You know, and you can, I think in that way, I think it's really good to watch a teacher teach, you know, and you can
Right.
do this with film, you can do this on, as I said, YouTube, and get a feel for it. And then hopefully, when things open up again, we're going to have more opportunity to actually be in the room with some of these great teachers.
I would love that.
You know, it's coming.
Can you talk about, it's not the first time that I've heard that when somebody comes into contact with a guru or a teacher, that just something intrinsically happens where you're just drawn or attached or just moved in a certain way. Is there a way to describe that in your experience? What happened with you and how you were drawn to this type of, or this practice of Buddhism?
Well, I wasn't really interested in religion per se. I was involved very deeply in the Christian church. My parents were very much involved in the Christian church, the Disciples of Christ, which is a very progressive, positive.
Right.
I don't know. It's not a denomination. I'm not sure how to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was a choir director there for 25 years. My dad was a deacon. You know, very kind of traditional, conventional folks.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And through a series of events, when I was 12 or 13, I decided it wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I then was sort of not paying any attention to his spiritual life, you know, after that, until, oddly enough, I moved to Mount Shasta, which is like this, you know, the people that live there, spiritual vortex.
Vortex, yeah.
You know, Mount Shasta is holy, and it's a really incredible place, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my daughter was born on that mountain. I met my teacher when I lived there.
Uh-huh.
I had some very significant life changes in this place. But I was already kind of doing these what I thought were made-up meditations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was visualizing white light coming down through the top of my head and so on. And then my friend said, "You want to go meet this teacher?" I said, "Sure," because I was open.
Yes.
If I hadn't been open, I would have said, "Yeah, I don't think so."
Right.
You know, but I went. When I came into the room, they were doing a Buddhist ritual, Vajrayana ritual. And it was familiar. And I'd never heard it before, but it felt familiar. That's the word I can use.
Wow.
It was just, I was deeply moved. And when I saw him and listened to him talk, I felt a connection. And it's very hard to talk about these things because they're not tangible.
Right.
But, you know, the word is recognition.
Mm-hmm.
I recognized that was that I could relate to this, which is funny in a way because here I am in the United States. I had kind of a wild series of years, teenage and 20s, and I'd never gone to any Eastern religious event. Mm-hmm. I'd never heard Tibetan ritual. I didn't have any outward connection. It was all inner. You know, it's just like I knew. And, you know, we know if we are able to use our intuition and get out of the way, we recognize things. We can tell. I feel good. This feels good. This feels right. Mm-hmm. You know, or maybe this feels weird, but it's familiar.
Right.
At the same time, you know.
Like that. Yeah.
So that's kind of how it was. And then I just thought, oh, I need to. And all the circumstances were good too, because I was living in Mount Shasta, and this was in Ashland, Oregon, which is, I don't know, 80 miles north. But my friends wanted to go up once a week. Mm-hmm. I got a ride in the back of the truck, literally. Uh-huh. In the back of a pickup truck. And we'd go up every week, and I had no idea what Rinpoche was talking about. He was teaching on something that was way over my head, but I wanted to do it. I just knew, and I took studious notes and everything, and as time went by, everything started to kind of fall into place. Mm-hmm. So, and then I decided I would formally become a Buddhist.
Wow.
And I'm sure it's different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I have heard a lot of people, especially people my generation, talk about when they met Gyaltru Rinpoche in particular, and there was a lot of like recognition.
Wow.
You know, just I knew this was for me.
Mm-hmm.
How I felt was finally somewhere I fit. I never felt like I fit in the culture, you know, in the country.
Right.
You know, I was kind of rebellious. You know, I was living in buses and trailers and, you know, something that proper society might look down on and think, you know, that ill of or something.
Right.
But it was just the way that I was. I couldn't quite find my niche, you know. And I'd done various jobs, nothing. And I left college because it wasn't it wasn't working for me either.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never gotten back to college, but I've had extensive education in Buddhism because I've been exposed to all these great teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And also my teacher put me in positions where I'd have to learn how to do what I'm doing today. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. But like I was asked to be the administrator of the educational program. Well, I'd never been an administrator and I'd never done that sort of work, but it's sort of just I just developed as I went. So it was fortunate that he put me in these different positions. I was a volunteer secretary for 7 years, and I had abilities I wasn't even aware of that came to the fore because I was in these positions as a volunteer. I highly recommend volunteering. It's so good for us to do something for someone else. It's a really great way to get out of your own head and all our self-concerns. And it really helps us mature as humans, I think. So I did, you know, I don't know, 40 years of volunteering, 30 years of volunteering.
Wow.
40.
Wow.
Well, I've had time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not trying to impress. I'm just saying, you know, you find something that you believe in, that you can really put energy into, and you don't know what could be the result of that. It could be really, really positive.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm at right now in my life. I used to be a chef for about 15 years and then recently got hired at a Waldorf school where I was cooking just vegan, vegetarian meals for the students. Everybody
maybe
ate
you
the
can
same
teach
thing.
me how to cook.
I would love to.
That's something that fell through my cracks.
I would love to. Yeah. And then COVID happened and then I stopped cooking.
Yeah.
But then they asked me, do you want to hike with the children? Do you want to teach classes to the children? So the more I've been working with this school, the more of a relationship that I've developed with the students. And whereas before I was just kind of this unseen figure that would cook them food and then leave to go to my other job while they ate the food, and it's like, who's cooking this? But now they could put a face to the person that was cooking their food. And it just made me feel the impermanence of, wow, these kids are going to grow up someday and I'm going to be gone, you know? And then it also made me think of the idea that maybe I should volunteer to see both sides at a hospice or I don't even know where to begin, where people are sick and on their way. I've experienced it a lot as a kid. I helped my grandma after she had a stroke. I would stay at their place in San Francisco for summers and help her to the restroom. And
that's wonderful.
You know, and I was doing it from junior high to high school.
It's really wonderful.
And my mom's mom, I developed a really close relationship with her. And I guess in a way that's kind of why I do what I do now. Is I've been in a lot of funerals and I've been around a lot of sick and dying people because my parents never sheltered us from it. I don't even know if they had the resources to hire a babysitter while they went to funeral. We were all there.
I think that's really the best way.
Yeah.
I really, really do. I think sheltering children from the realities of life, and of course there are boundaries that need to be observed, I think, for children. We're not here to, we're not wanting to shock them.
Right.
But death is imminent at all times. No one ever knows when they're going to die. And to hide it, and which is what's happened in this country, hiding death, which is what has happened through the funeral industry. The person dies, they're immediately removed from the house, they're embalmed, which makes them look, like a wax museum figure. And thank goodness there are funerals and memorials, because closure is so essential.
Truly.
So that helps with closure, but the cost, it's unnecessary to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, if you want to, of course, but many people can't. And the point of it is to not hide death, because death is what informs us that we're alive, for one thing. I think that if death and dying or end of life were some kind of educational process happened in high schools, I am so for this.
Right.
Because it makes you understand the preciousness of your life. It helps you prioritize what you want to do. Even if you don't even know what you want to do, you have this inner awareness that your life has importance. And we want to have the opportunity to find the meaning of what that is to us, So without the awareness of death, I think we are more likely to spend time wasting our lives in a way. I hate using that term. Our culture is so completely engulfed with distraction. And, people are unhappy. Everyone suffers. At some point, everyone suffers. Even those with abundance and money and beautiful homes and all of this. That does not solve the issue of suffering. And I think if we can have time, or take the time to go inward and work with ourselves and understand what it is that drives us. What is it that makes me want to do something for someone else? And really examine the potential that life has. In my experience, doing things for others and service work makes me happy.
Right. You've done it
if
your
it's
whole
all
life.
About me, it gets boring sooner or later. It's like you can only go on so many vacations and have so many dinners out and watch so many movies and read so many books.
Right.
And, all the other many things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have a good time. I'm all for having a good time. But I feel like our lives there's more to it than that. And especially if we're having difficulties in accepting what's happening in the world. And I don't know how anyone could accept what's happening in this world right now. To do some kind of service,
right,
or volunteering, or whatever you do to give, that is a really great way to deal with suffering, and also to help us mature spiritually. You're asking some really interesting sort of complex, or you're making complex statements. I think that you can find out more about yourself by volunteering.
Right. I think that's the next step, because I'm very much in line with what you're saying, as well as making observations and hearing that, yes, the world is very youth-centric. There's not enough focus on the whole circle of things, the whole circle of life. You can go anywhere in a bar or a gym, and you'll hear so many jokes about how old some people are referring to themselves, like, oh, I'm just getting old, or, I'm not. But also, I'm getting older as well, and I'm realizing that that's not true. Like, getting older is beautiful, because we get to realize that, yes, death is literally just always around the corner, and because of that, we could distill all the distractions in life only because of that focus on death and dying. And it's weird because I know what I was like when I was 20 years old, and you feel like you're going to live forever. But
yeah, you do. Well, there's just mortality is not something that's in your face unless you've had people dying around you and it changes you. You know, I hope I live a long life. There's a lot of things I still want to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, not all of them are selfless acts. You know, there's things I personally want to do. But I have this work. I'd really like to see this nonprofit continue and expand. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to find young people that can help take over. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know how many years I'm going to have the energy to do it. And likewise, the people that are volunteers, I think not everybody. We have 2 young people that are on our video archive crew. Most of us are 60 and over. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, we're aware that, you know, we're going to be here for so long, you know, and there's so much to life. I feel like everything we can do to give deepens our experience in life. Whatever it is that you do or can do, it doesn't have to be a big deal. You know, it can be very simple. So that's important.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because the ego in me is always, or used to say, that everything has to be a big deal. This podcast has to be a big deal, but it really just needs to hit the right people. That maybe, you know, you can't change everybody, like what we were saying, but I'm hoping with recordings like this, it's just a beacon to, and was that the idea of TLC? Was that, hey, we're just going to start something, and if we reach out to people, or if it's something for people to reach out back to us, because, you know, we started this.
There wasn't a lot of ambition involved. In fact, there really hasn't been much ambition involved. It's more been, you know, you see a need, and then you want to do something to help fulfill that need. Mm-hmm. And it was obvious to me that in the little community where I have been for many years, there's resistance to acknowledging death. There's fear of death. When I think of the thing that most people are most afraid of, it's death.
Right.
I know how it feels to feel afraid, and I don't want that to be the case for me or anybody else. And I've watched people die in different situations, and death can be a very beautiful transition for the person dying and for the people that love them. With enough awareness about things that can be done and enough preparation and mutual agreement and good communication is essential. We can really clear a way for people when they're dying so that they have a positive death. And it can be a nurturing experience for everyone involved. And so many times that's not the case. And particularly with families that don't know how to communicate about it, it gets incredibly complicated and painful. Unbelievable. You know, I'm sure people know this just talking to friends. If the end of life paperwork isn't finished, if the will isn't finished, if the advance directive hasn't been done, somebody's suddenly ill or dying and nobody knows what to do. People tend to argue and struggle, and they feel overwhelmed with the responsibility. They feel like they need to make a decision. They don't agree on the decisions for the person who's dying. So it's good to write down everything the way you want things to work out as best you can. Of course, nothing's for sure.
Right.
We don't know how we're going to die, but just the process of recording and documenting our wishes
Right.
is deeply contemplative, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps your people. Communicating with your family, making sure if there's things that you want people to have, that you either give them to them before you die or they're labeled and there's a list in your will so that there's none of this conflict that arises.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was doing hospice work, volunteering and paid, it was always the families that were more difficult to work with than the people who were dying.
Right.
Because the families, almost across the board, hadn't talked with their loved one. You know, the wishes weren't recorded. Everyone's already dealing with their grief, even before the person dies, of course.
Right.
You're anticipating their death. And it really fractures people's emotional states, and so thus mental states, you know, trying to make decisions when you're under pressure and you're bereaved. It's very difficult. So we encourage people to fill out this is all secular stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Fill out your advance directive, make a will. If you own a house, you have stuff, get a will and trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the trust actually is a huge benefit. Nothing goes into probate.
Mm-hmm.
It goes directly to whoever it's going to be left to.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that aspect, but then there's like, you know, when you're dying, what do you want to be surrounded by? Do you want people to be here and support you in whatever your practice is? Do you want music? Do you want to be you want to be at home? Hopefully people can be at home as much as possible.
Right.
It's so much more peaceful. People don't realize that when you die in a hospital, your body's moved within a half an hour usually. You go straight into the morgue downstairs in the basement. If you have a spiritual practice and you want to be there and practice for the person, that's really not so easy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things, and we're trying to cover that information so people can access it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the manual is a very powerful piece of information, and a few of the things that I read, I highlighted, and I kind of had some questions, if that's okay to ask you about it. One of the things that I read in part of this process that was laid out was, let's see here, nurture an attitude of acceptance and harmony in order to remove any bondage from the consciousness. Fill the atmosphere with love and a sense of calm and peace. And immediately I thought of a lot of aunts and uncles of the deaths that I've been around, where people are just hysterical around the dead body and around the dying person. And the question that came to my mind immediately was, is that okay to brush that away individually, even though if it's not truthful? And you mentioned earlier that practice of letting go of our own personal experiences.
You mean our attachment?
Is that in relation? Is that practice in relation to attachment in general, or
well,
what's the purpose of?
If you're getting at why you wouldn't want to be emotionally demonstrative around the dying person or the corpse.
Yes.
In Buddhist belief, well, first of all, it makes complete sense. If there's someone dying and you're crying and, you know, wringing your hands with that person in their presence, it's going to upset their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want is for the person's mind to be relaxed when they die. They need to accept their own death, which is very difficult for many people. And if you have your relatives and loved ones crying and wringing their hands and carrying on, in your presence, it's not going to be easy to relax. Now, I'm not saying that you wouldn't cry because you're losing someone, but you would do it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You would leave the room. What we want is to provide an atmosphere that's conducive to calm, acceptance, and we want that person to feel loved. Now, of course, grief is an expression of love.
Mm-hmm.
But grief has a lot to do with attachment to ourself. We're losing someone that we feel like we can't bear it. It's incredibly painful.
Right.
However, what's more important? Helping this person die gracefully or being hysterical because we're losing them?
Mm-hmm.
It's when someone's dying, it's all about them. It's all about what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not trained for this, so we don't know. I'm not criticizing people for what people do. I really understand it, having been there. But for instance, when my husband was dying, one person who was very close to him, I had to go to her and say, I know you're really upset, and you're crying. I think it would be better if you came out,
mm-hmm.
and I'll sit with you, or somebody in the family can sit with you, because it can be disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's common sense.
Right.
In terms of crying around the corpse,
mm-hmm.
in Buddhism and other cultures, that believe that consciousness leaves the body and continues either into a future lifetime or perhaps into some other realm, heavens, whatever the religion teaches.
Mm-hmm.
We want the consciousness to be at peace. And Buddhist thought is once the consciousness leaves the body, it's acutely aware. It's not like it just disappears.
Right. Acutely aware, you say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the consciousness could be around in the home, for a period of time.
Wow.
And there are special Buddhist rituals and practices, one particularly called Poa, where you, either for yourself or someone else, help to eject the consciousness so that it does go into a very positive mind state or realm or rebirth following death. So we want to protect that time, that period of time. And in Buddhism, it states, the teachings state, that it could take up to 49 days because there's a whole process that happens after death. It does not end when the heart stops beating. There's actually a whole other series of events that take place that if people are interested in, I suggest reading about this.
Mm-hmm.
There's some incredibly great books. One that I could suggest is a book called Natural Liberation.
Mm-hmm.
It's right here. It's teachings on the 6 bardos.
Oh, the bardos, yes.
And, right now we're in the daytime bardo. And when you're dying, you're in the bardo of dying. And after you die, you're in another bardo. There are different bardos. Dream bardo is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that phone going to be a problem? I forgot to take my phone.
No, you can take the call if you like. Or
can you hold on?
Yeah. And the teachers, you just reach out to them and it's
I've been
yes
asking.
or no?
I write them and I ask, and almost invariably they say yes.
Wow.
Because of the need for end-of-life awareness.
Yeah.
Particularly in our country because of the way death has been hidden. And there's other countries that this is very similar, a similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
I understand Brazil is very similar. But we've reached people in Europe and Mexico, Canada, Asia, not regularly. It depends on who the teacher is.
Right.
Because we don't have marketing per se. whoever is the guest teacher, we ask, can you give me a contact for your administrative staff, so that I can ask them to put this on your website, your Facebook page, and any social media you have. Then that informs that group of people. Some of those people have signed up on our website, or for our newsletter. So the newsletter comes out once or twice a month, and people get information about what's on the website, whatever programs are coming up. Have you signed up for it?
I have, yes.
Good.
Yeah, I get it.
So you know what's coming next. And like the last event and this one, I've been dealing solely with bereavement and grief, which is another thing that people don't talk about.
Bereavement and grief. Yeah.
Grief and loss. I mean, my experience and the experience of many other people, and something I learned when I was in the bereavement training, was that when someone dies, people back away from you. You'd think they want to come forth and come closer. Usually what happens is people are around for about a week or 2 weeks, and they go back to their lives and think, well, they'll get over it sooner or later. It's not like that. Some people spend the rest of their lives grieving on some level about a major loss.
Right.
So we really want to help people learn that you don't need to be afraid of grief and bereavement, that you can be there for someone, that you can listen. It's not like you have to know what to say, but to show up and listen is a huge gift,
I think that's the big thing too, is because when people come into contact with somebody that has a relative or a loved one that just passed away, there's this need of, I have to fix this, I have to say a certain thing to help comfort them. When you're right, it sometimes just takes just sitting next to somebody and just being there.
Yeah, to say, how are you feeling?
Right.
Instead of, I know exactly how you feel. Well, you can't know that. But if you've been bereaved yourself, you can say, I had a really hard time with this, and I just want to be here, right. And maybe go out for a walk, take them out to eat, do something, anything that helps them feel like they're not completely isolated and alone, because that's what a lot of people end up feeling.
Right. I
did. After my husband died, it was terrible. The people that we'd been spending time with totally backed away. And it's like it's compounded grief. It's like you're grieving the loss of whoever this person is,
right.
Particularly a family member or spouse or child. That kind of grief is...
Yeah.
And then people back away from you. So you're isolated.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Can I share something with you?
Please.
So the reason why I've kind of ventured out into looking for a teacher or deepening my meditation practice is because throughout the past 10 years that my wife and I have been married, we have been trying to start a family, but through circumstances unexplainable to the medical field, that we haven't been able to start a family. And I remember the last podcast guest that I had, she was going through a divorce, and she said the grief of the idea of having a husband is dead. We're gone. The relationship is dead. She basically said the idea.
The divorce,
sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm with you.
So the divorce, the idea of love, that's died. And I remember thinking the same thing too, was that there was some point in my life just recently where I was very attached to the idea of becoming a father, the idea of having a son or a daughter and starting a family. And I remember feeling very angry. I think I still acknowledge the anger to this day that nobody has ever come up to us during that time that we were going through IVF, or when other people around us were conceiving their own children, that nobody came up to us and checked in. It was like, are you guys okay?
Did they know that you wanted to have a family?
Yeah, they did.
Avoiding the topic.
Yeah,
we're so good at avoidance. Right. We are master avoiders.
Right. And so I'm looking at this manual and Tibetan Buddhism, and it's very steeped in rituals and exploring other realms, and you know, the manual and all these, I mean, rituals of Rosek and Ka. I made a note of that after cremation.
Oh yeah,
it's layers and layers of rituals.
Vajrayana ritual, yeah. Those aren't necessarily things that lay people would even know how to do. You would probably do those things in association with a lama or a temple.
Right, but they're so beautiful.
They are beautiful.
You're not supposed to touch a dead body or be around it for more than, you know, you're not supposed to be at home with. I mean, that's what I've always thought.
You mean the conventional?
The convention, yeah.
Yeah, the conventional viewpoint, which is really very much, and I'm not an expert at all, but that's really taken place more and more since the Civil War in this country. The whole idea, like, for instance, about embalming. Embalming was, and I could be, you know, I apologize for any errors in my not understanding about this, but embalming was kind of invented so that families could have their sons and husbands shipped home from across the expanse after, you know, all these bodies they're on the ground during the war, and then the families want the bodies. And so embalming was a way to preserve the bodies so that they weren't rotting all the way back to be returned to their families. But the whole funeral industry, especially in the last 100 years or less, has taken the home funeral, which was normal and acceptable, out of the home and into the mortuary. And through that process has really removed a lot of awareness of death. You know, in the days of my grandmother, when somebody died, their body would be in state in the home. People would come and pay their respects. You know, people would bring food. The women would make the food and bring the food and support the widow or widower. You know, the children would be present. The family would be aware of the entire thing from start to finish. And it really, I think, is a much more balanced view of life to have that aspect not hidden. And then the funeral industry started up, and of course it was very nice for people and convenient if you could afford it, you know. But what happened, the result is that less and less awareness about death. And there's a lot more to it than that. I'm speaking very simple, you know, this is very simple in terms of the whole reasoning and reasons why things have gotten to where they are today.
And it is simple, but it's not easy to talk about with people, you know, bringing up. Well,
you're not seeming to have too much trouble talking about it, but
yeah, right.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, I'm having no problem talking with you about it.
Agreed. I agree.
You know, it's people that just haven't been aware of it, and because it's been so hidden, and fear of death.
Right.
And what you said earlier, also, the youth-oriented culture that we're in. You know, somehow it's become negative to have wrinkles, to have gray hair, to have any signs of aging, to reveal your age. It's like, who cares? You know? And the fact is, in many, many cultures around the world, particularly in indigenous cultures, the elders are respected because it's true. You do become wiser as you grow older if you are really paying attention and if you are really trying to practice being a good human. What's the word?
Righteous.
Helpful, kind human being. You learn more and more. And I feel much better about myself now than I did 40 years ago. there's just no contest, you know. Lots of falling down and getting back up, you know, lots of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But you learn from those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there's so much elder discrimination and ageism, we're really ignoring one of the most precious parts of our culture is our elders.
Right.
And, you know, now instead of elders living their lives out with their families in the home, many people are going to retirement communities, which is fine, no criticism.
Mm-hmm.
But, or when they're too old to take care of, they end up in convalescent hospitals, which is one of the saddest places that you'll ever go.
I've seen that a lot too.
You know,
yeah.
And people are isolated, and people still can have quality of life and can contribute to the society and the culture as elders. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just finished 4 years working with elders as a creative writing coach. And what wonderful people. I can't tell you. The things that they would write, their stories.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, they're much more interesting than many young people I've met. No offense to anyone. But it's like you've got these people that have really been in life,
mm-hmm.
steeped in life, and can relate it in very beautiful ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not criticizing young people. I love people of all ages, you know. But I think we're neglecting one of our greatest treasures by not acknowledging the value and the importance of elders in the community. Mm-hmm. And then when people are older and dying, suddenly we think we have to think for them, and people are very equipped and able to make decisions for themselves about what they want done and how they want things to go to the best of our abilities. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it has to be written down. Mm. And it has to be notarized. Mm-hmm. It has to be legal. Mm-hmm. Because, as you know, you've read the news, so many strange things happen. Even in families, you know.
Yeah.
You know, particularly if they're complicated medical situations. Mm-hmm. Like people being kept in comas, and I mean there's just myriad different obstacles that arise. And if you decide, if you're 75, 80, 90 years old and you don't want to be resuscitated, you want do not resuscitated DNR mm-hmm. on your post, which is a very important document that people should have on their refrigerator or the front door. Mm-hmm. You know, it's your right. Mm-hmm. If you have a heart attack or something, to just go ahead and die. If you're prepared, you have nothing to be concerned about. Mm-hmm. You know, if you've talked to your family, you've told them how much you love them. You can write legacy letters. This is something that I'm hoping we can begin doing as part of our work. And let people know how you feel and how much you love them and what you want them to have, and how, you know, all of these things can be recorded. And it seems like, oh, that's such a daunting task, and it's a big task. Mm-hmm. But it can be really deeply informative and contemplative and beneficial.
So you've seen throughout your life's work, have you seen people that are at peace or are ready to go transition?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to die, but when it's time, when it's obvious that's what's happening, I have seen people that absolutely accept it. Mm-hmm. Even young people. Mm-hmm. I had one of my closest friends of my entire life, Ron Fiddler. Great guy. Got cancer when he was about 37. And eventually died at 39, and was very aware of what was going on and did not hide from it. Talked to his friends. He was a Buddhist practitioner, so he decided to go into a retreat knowing that he probably wouldn't come out. He didn't. He died in the retreat. Before he went into the retreat, and he had a very wonderful sense of humor. I hesitate because there are many different adjectives you could say before sense of humor.
Yeah.
And so before he died, he had a party.
Amazing.
He invited 12 people and he called it the Last Supper.
12 people. Nice.
And we had this great time, this great dinner, and he went into the retreat, and a month later he died in retreat, and there were these amazing signs when he died. In Buddhism, there are signs when there's been a very successful death and transference of the consciousness. And I remember I was invited to come sit with his corpse after he died. I wanted to come and do some practice. And I got to go by myself, and I walked in the house, and I just felt like prostrating to him, his body. You'd think I would be like broken, because he was my dearest, really dear friend. We just spent so much time together. But the whole house was, the feeling in that house was amazing, and I didn't ever cry. I cried when I found out he had cancer. There are so many different reasons for grief. When I did this talk for San Francisco Village about bereavement, the request was, can you talk about all the different reasons that one would feel loss and grief during COVID? So I started making a list. This is the short list. It was 21 things. That's the short list. Because look at all the different losses. I mean, you lose your job, or you lose your, a lot of people lost their homes. You lose contact with people that you love. You can't see your family. I mean, it just goes down the list. Those are all losses. All of those can entail grief. And grief is made up of different emotions. Sorrow, anger, depression. Acceptance is when you can start to turn the corner. But I don't think you can jump to acceptance unless you really are already there. These things come up, and we have to work with them. And, I was trying to think of ways, and this is not just me. Many different people that are in end of life, I'm sure, have suggested all these things. There's different ways to work with the loss and the grief, Definitely if you have a spiritual practice, definitely do that. Talking to people, really, really important. So you have to find people that are open enough to talk about it with you.
Right.
Or allow you to talk, and have someone who's a good listener. Exercise, art, writing, very, very therapeutic. After my husband died, I wrote 3 blank books in 1 year. I wrote so much. Just trying to get through it, And so there are many different things we can do to help ourselves. This is, they call this self-care.
Self-care, yeah.
Yeah. And if we're not educated about them, then, you get into that point where you're so bereft that it's hard to function. You're not going to maybe think about these things. So we need to help each other. We really need to help each other. And one of the main reasons I wanted to do TLC, besides wanting to help people have a good death, is to help people through grief. Because you really don't hear about it unless you've gone through a death and there's a hospice. You've somehow fortunately connected with hospice. Hospices are just one of the best, most helpful things you can do for yourself and your person. And I forgot what I was saying.
The reason why you started TLC.
Oh yeah. And trying to help people feel less afraid and more comfortable with the reality and the fact that we are going to die, and that we need to be able to talk about it.
Right.
So we have this program called Deep Chat, which is some support groups, but they're not just about end of life. They're about impermanence, because loss and impermanence are, related. Yeah. And if we can be, if we can openly speak about our losses, it just helps us move through them. You know, so we have these 2 groups, and we're about to, I think, start at least 2 more. We're having an event coming up on July 12th, a Zoom event, just to introduce what Deep Chat's about.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a support group in the traditional sense, and it's not a therapy group because there's no therapist involved.
Right.
We take turns facilitating. We bring in different topics, so it really can move around.
That's cool.
Though both the groups this last year, I think COVID inspired this. We both went through and are writing or working with the idea of spiritual directives, which is when you document what you want to happen in terms of your spiritual life as you die and afterward, which is really helpful.
Yeah, that's just a beautiful exercise in general to even think about.
It's been really great. We've had the greatest conversations.
Yeah. I like that. It's kind of like in Tagalog, they call it pagpag, when you take a blanket or a rug and you kind of like dust it out. It seems like that's what you're providing for people. It's just some...
Shake out the rug.
Just shake out the rug. In listening to your experience and how... I like to avoid this word, but I can't help but use it. Serendipitous. Everything has been just with how you found Buddhism and your teacher, and then later on transitioned into working with bereavement and hospice. Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
So, in a sense, I feel like your practice or life's work has been centered around mostly death. Is that safe to say?
No, mostly, well, Buddhism and writing. Probably. And a little art on the side.
Nice.
Writing was the first thing.
Right. So in all of your experience with the practices that you've put into place with your art and spirituality, how has that affected the way that you see relationships or even yourself?
In every way.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm a parent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so my daughter's going to be 38 next month. I was a single parent pretty much most of the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And she has been like one of my main teachers.
Wow.
I mean, I've learned so much from being a parent, and still we're very close. We went through some very difficult years. Single parenting, I do not recommend it. It's really difficult. And because I was sort of unconventional, I didn't go to college and I couldn't make a good salary or whatever. This turns out to be the work that I was needing to do. But between being Sangye's mother and also being involved in Buddhism and helping create a Dharma center in Oregon, down to, hauling cinder blocks and painting and, organizing administration and doing all of that kind of thing. And then writing. Definitely. I started writing when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been incredibly helpful, too. And I see them all integrated. They're all integrated. You can't take one away from the other. But that's how our lives are a lot of times. Not always.
Mm-hmm.
It has been pretty interesting how it's been, as we're saying, serendipitous. But I think that I didn't have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
I never had a plan. People advise heavily against that. Mm-hmm. We often think, of course, we want people to feel secure. We want our kids to be secure. We want them to go to college. We want them to, have comforts of life. And I just kind of rebelled against all of that. And I'm not sure exactly why, except that I never fit into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I felt. And meeting my Buddhist teacher was a pivotal point in my life. And I spent 4 years living at the center and then living nearby for many other years and volunteering a lot and also being involved in the writing community and writing and poetry and publishing and doing many, many readings over the years. I still have stage fright. I mean, sort of, I've made myself do things that I was afraid of. I think that's a really important thing, actually.
Right.
You can't really build confidence if you don't do things that you're not confident in. And so, because I was a poet, reading your poetry was part of the job. So I, made myself do that. The first time I gave a poetry reading, I was shaking so hard I could hardly read the piece of paper with the poem on it. But I think if you follow your heart, and I think to do that we have to have enough time to ourselves, whether it's a few minutes a day or a retreat or what have you, to really feel through our aspirations and our longings and find the thing that pulls us. And if we can do that for someone else or somehow give to other people, I think that informs our whole lives, and it really helps to build confidence. It leads to spiritual maturity, emotional maturity. It's kind of essential for a full life, I think. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I get lost in
one way or another.
One
way or another, it's answered. Yeah, I was just kind of like thinking too that with the people that you've surrounded yourself with, and your practices and all the experiences that you've had around death and dying and helping people achieve or not achieve. I don't like to use that word. Helping people, I guess. Maybe it is achieve the
like
death,
accomplish their aspirations or something.
Yeah, or having the death, that the dignity that should come with death.
The dignity. Yeah, we haven't even talked about that.
Right,
it's a big thing.
And grace, right? And knowing that there is impermanence. I was just I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are about the relationships in your life and how you've kind of facilitated that on your own, or
facilitated,
not facilitated, but how you've just managed relationships around you.
Well, sometimes not very well, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I was married for 6.5 years. I married at 53 or 4. I married late. My husband and I fell in love. It was classic. He was 20 years older than I, so our marriage wasn't long. But he was also a major poet, David Meltzer, and we did many readings together. But we had a home life together, and it was like a practice.
Right.
When I brought my husband to meet my spiritual teacher, my Buddhist teacher, Gyatrul Rinpoche, he said, "Your marriage is your practice." And I found that to be very true, because to be a good partner, all these virtues need to come into play regularly. Patience and understanding and generosity and stamina and perseverance and, putting the other person first. These things aren't easy.
Right.
Deep commitment like that, and when he became ill and taking care of him and managing things that I really wasn't prepared to manage, it was hard. It was a struggle. And before that, I hadn't had any really long-term relationships. I spent a lot of years by myself. I did some long solitary retreats. Spent time having some relationships that I shouldn't have been in. I mean, you learn as you go. My most consistent relationship has been with my daughter. And I have some friendships that have spanned my life. But I'm still making new friends. Finally, after, COVID has been so difficult. And I lived alone through it. And my husband died. It took me 2.5 years to start feeling sort of like myself, except I was different because of the whole thing. I felt like I was getting back up on my horse, so to speak, and then COVID hit. And I had a very hard time with it. It was really difficult. Isolation is difficult. I think what we can do to help people not feel isolated will make the world a better place.
Right.
You know, and it was kind of insufferable. But since things have been opening back up, starting to feel the load lighten, you know, but the world has changed.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to be the same. I don't think it's going to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even more inspiring, really, to want to do something helpful. And there's so many different things that we can do, you know. So I think that, I don't know how long I'll live, of course. Maybe another 10 or 15 years, who knows. I don't feel old, except for the arthritis.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just want to create and provide.
Yeah.
That's what gives me a sense of purpose, right, and a sense of satisfaction, or maybe satisfaction. It's not self-satisfaction, though. It's kind of like, you know, when you've done a good job at something and you can go sit down and just feel content. You know? Mm-hmm. So it's really important. Relationships, you know, I feel like I'm a good friend. And that feels good. You know? And there's different qualities that develop in friendships. You learn how to be loyal. You learn how to be present. We can be present for each other.
Right, right.
You can be present for somebody that you meet on the street.
Yeah, more so than some people that you know for a lifetime, I'm sure.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, I think life is an educational program.
Right. I mean, you hit it all on the nose like just with what you just said in the past few minutes. You know, that's something that I've realized myself, is that, you know, I lean more towards this type of discussion, going into, you know, the types of doors that are like, you know, temples, and having discussions with, I mean, I don't do that, but that's where I feel like I would like my life to go. I'm being called in that direction. And on top of that, I've tried to, you know, bring my wife along with me, because I felt like I'm finding a peace of mind that I never got when I was a lot younger. And so I've just realized that she is a spirit being too, and that she needs her own space to grow at her own pace.
And she may be bringing you along.
I definitely feel that.
It's a shared experience, you know. And people, one of the great things about being in a loving relationship is you can introduce each other to things.
Right.
You know, and share things and have different viewpoints on the same things and have a wider perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, you hit it on the nose. It's just, you know, nothing is permanent. Everything is waves, and I think even though that it might not be perfect, nothing in life is perfect.
Or it's all perfect.
Or it's all perfect, because I mean, that's just the way it is.
Look at it that way because we're so self-involved. It's perfect when it's working for us.
Right.
But no, it's not about that.
I like that. Well, one more question. I may edit this out. I'm not sure if I should ask it or not, but I'm going to ask anyway because I'm really curious. What can you speak about what the differences are between somebody that just meditates twice a day without a guru or without any attachment to a meditation group versus somebody who has found a teacher and a group and a community? If you can talk about.
Well, I feel like meditating is always good. No matter what the context is, you're calming the mind. there are so many different kinds of meditation now. There's New Age meditations. There's guided meditations. The asset, there are many assets, I think, to having a teacher. But it has to be the right teacher. And the only one that can really determine that is you and the teacher. Now, yeah, I've been really fortunate in the serendipitous way I've met my teacher. But I also think that one can look for a teacher, absolutely. A good Buddhist teacher does not proselytize or seek out students and disciples.
Interesting.
They don't even offer to teach, they need to be asked, And the benefits of having a kind of personal relationship with a teacher, especially one that's really a spiritual master, is that they know your mind. They can guide you personally. If you have questions, you have a place to go. If you're making mistakes in your practice, you have someone who can help you return to a more conducive way of practicing. The benefit of a spiritual community, of course, is that you have other people that you can look to, congregate with, practice with, perhaps even rely on. Friendships where you have a common viewpoint, but never to exclude other viewpoints. I mean, the thing is, we don't want to become sectarian and exclusive. We want to be open. This is about opening. This is not about closing. And for myself, if I hadn't had the Buddhist teacher, the teachings in the community, it would have been very hard to focus. There are so many distractions. It's very hard to be completely self-reliant, which is what we want, of course, but completely self-motivated. When there are times when we need support. A spiritual community can provide that. Spiritual communities can always also be incredibly complicated and challenging. You get people together, there's going to be politics.
Right.
There's no way to avoid it.
Right.
Because anyone who wants to maintain a position or think they're right or have control is going to cause, friction. But those are also the things that you practice with. I mean, the value of having a spiritual practice when you're in partnership, relationship, family, it's amazing because here you have your whole field of practice right here at home. In fact, it's good when you have families and partners to take time apart, have little breaks so that you can reevaluate where you are and what you are doing within the context of the relationship, and your life. Practicing on one's own is good, of course. There's been tons and tons of solitary yogis and yoginis and practitioners and adepts. But mostly those people have first studied and first had guidance, And the thing that's really the most valuable, I think, about a spiritual community, particularly a Buddhist one, is the foundation of bodhicitta or compassion that is in everything and needs to be one's aspiration and motivation. Simply sitting down to meditate and watch your thoughts and watch your breath is good. But if your motivation is to do this for the benefit of others, then you have a really true spiritual practice, in my feeling. That foundation of compassion and virtue and wanting to benefit others is the most essential aspect, I think. If we don't have that going for us, you could sit down and you could do practice for 10 years and not make much progress.
Truly.
You could sit and read all the most profound books and be a scholar, but if you don't have that bodhicitta or aspiration to benefit others, you may not mature very much. You might have a bunch of intellectual understanding, but your heart, where is your heart? That's really important. You know, and there are other religions, Christianity, Catholicism, you know, the bottom line there is to, I think, the teachings of Christ, certainly. He was totally hip. I mean, he knew. I have no problem with the teachings of Jesus. You know, they've been distorted in some ways because of religion, and people use them to their own benefit and to make a lot of money, and, you know, and so on. But, you know, do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal. This is common sense.
Inherently good.
And and you know, there are just so many of the pithy parables and things in Christianity, but also in other spiritual traditions. Sufism and Zen Buddhism, which is really very different than Vajrayana Buddhism. Same precepts, totally different approaches. You know, there are many amazing religions in the world, and I think that we need to respect all of them. But we need to find something that helps us mature so that we can benefit others, whatever that might be.
Yeah, beautiful. I think before we end, since we both touched upon it, was the dignity aspect of death. How do you feel that, well, first of all, what is a dignified death? And how do you feel that your services, or a service like TLC, End of Life Care, helps achieve that?
Well, hospices in general, and palliative care, wherein if a person has, there's so many different ways and situations that people die in. But if you're dying, if you have an illness and your doctor tells you that you have such and such amount of time to live, dignity of death can include things like no longer performing unnecessary procedures, allowing people to remove the tubes, you know, being able to die at home surrounded by people that you love and that love you, being able to choose how your body's handled, being able to choose what you do in your last days. Particularly in this culture, the American Medical Association and the agreed upon practices of modern doctors are to keep people alive at all costs. But, you know, for instance, the DNR, the do not resuscitate. If you're an elderly person and you decide you don't want to be resuscitated, that's about dignity at death. Because if the EMTs do come, they're going to come and they're going to break your ribs trying to get your heart to keep going, which means you're going to be in pain for months while your ribs may or may not ever heal. You know, you can try to resuscitate someone and they might have lost oxygen for too long. I mean, there's all these repercussions. And you may not want to die in a hospital hooked up with tubes and wires, and which is a very disruptive environment to be in, you know. Hard for your family to be there. People can always do spiritual practice for someone who's dying no matter where they are. You know, you don't have to be in the room. But I think a dignified death means that you've made some of the decisions, and hopefully all of the decisions, yourself. And that your family and you have communicated so that they can carry out your wishes to the best of their ability. And so that there's a peaceful and calm atmosphere where people understand that, yes, they're grieving, but we need to support the person that's dying. We can grieve later. We're going to have plenty of time to grieve, but we want to support the environment and the situation, help them as much as we can. I'm trying to get rid of stuff now. I'm so happy. I've emptied 2 storage units in the last year.
Good for you.
It was a huge amount of work, and I had a lot of help from friends. I had to ask for that help, which I don't like asking for help, but I have, because I don't want to leave a big mess for my family. Some of that dignity is knowing that you did your best, that you took care of your business, that you wrapped things up. If you can't, you can't. But most of us can. Many of us can. So I think that there's a lot that we can do to provide our own situation, and then relying on others that we trust that can be helpful to help us fulfill our aspirations. Is that what you meant?
Yeah. I just, honestly, I never really planned on asking that question. It just came to my mind for some reason, a dignified death. And, we're talking a lot about people being embalmed and looking outside of a hospital window on their way out into transition into the next life, or however they believe what happens after they die. And I've seen it a lot, and I don't like what I've seen.
Yeah.
And so when I came across this manual, I was just thinking to myself, this is kind of what I would love to have personally, even for my own mom and dad. They have their own beliefs, but I don't know. It's just, I think it's really important.
Some of the teachings that I've had, for instance, there's many things in this manual that you can do that don't have anything to do with your religion at all. And if someone does have a religious path that's other than Buddhism, you support them in that path. You can always do whatever Buddhist practice that you want, or whatever practice to help them on the side, in your own time, in a different location. You don't want to push anyone to do anything that they're not ready for, and certainly it's not time to, I would say, in most circumstances, it's not time to introduce a new religion.
Sure.
It's like, you're Christian, then you support that person with reading Psalms or the Lord's Prayer or whatever it is that comforts them. If they're Muslim, if they're Hindu, if they're, whatever the case is, you support them in their belief system. That helps people feel calm, supported. That's what you want to do. So it's totally inappropriate to push anyone, and including when someone's ready to stop eating, we do not bug them to eat. We don't want to, the thing is, when it's time for someone to die, and they're dying, they're actively dying, and it can take months, it could take a long time. We want to support that process. If we have resistance and we don't accept what's happening, it makes it harder for the person that's dying. Many times people will try to get their loved ones to eat. When they're done eating, they don't want to eat anymore. It hastens the process of dying, yes, but it also is natural. It's what we would naturally do. Like when animals are dying, they go off by themselves and they die, generally. Not always, but often. We don't necessarily want our person to be alone, but what if they do want to be alone? You want to find out what they want. You definitely want to keep it quiet and peaceful, unless they decide, I would like to hear Jimi Hendrix when I'm dying. And then you put on Jimi Hendrix, But you don't bring in a crowd of people. You allow them to see who they feel comfortable with. You don't bring in people, we should all try to resolve any difficulties and grudges and problems we have with the people in our lives so that that's done. You don't want to try to be doing that at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
Can really agitate the person who's dying, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really putting them foremost in our minds, like that's our child, and we want to do whatever we can to comfort them. I feel like we can do a lot. We can do much more than we even imagine.
Right.
And until we've been in a situation where we are serving someone who's ill or dying, we don't realize our own qualities and potential. So I know we often feel afraid of this. We don't want to be around someone who's going through these things because it reminds us of our own impermanence and our own eventual death. Or we think we don't know what to say, but really just being present, we will learn so much, and it could be a deep comfort and really contribute to the dignity of someone who's passing.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that you've shared in the past couple of hours. Are you doing okay? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I feel really. I'd like to say just a couple more things about TLC.
Please.
And I feel like it's really, again, serendipitous opportunity that you even got a hold of me. How you ran into our program. This is how news travels, I guess. But TLC is available on the web at tlcserves.org. And we have a variety of different kind of programs. We have, as I said, a resource-filled website, mostly geared toward Buddhist view, but with some very practical things on it also. Not that they're separate. And then we also have poetry there. We have some stories, some testimonials. We have videos, a book and film suggestion list, directions on how to do some of the Buddhist rituals or practices that are done. We have a page that tells you where you can sponsor prayers and different types of things that are traditional in Buddhism. Candles, sponsoring practices, or pujas they're called. And then we have a list of all our previous events and our upcoming events. And we have right now 2 and possibly 3 events planned. We've got on Saturday, July 23rd, we have a program called Moving Through Grief with Trust, an interactive program with Lama Chuyang. I don't know if this will even be up before this event happens, but she's a very wonderful teacher. And the thing, most of our events are recorded, and we make them available later on the website and our video page. But also, if you register for an event, you have access to the link to it for 3 months. So you can study it and review it and watch it again. Or if you can't even be there on the day of the event, you're still going to get this video that you can watch for 3 months if you register. And we feel like our donation requests are very reasonable. And then following that, in August, we have a program about green burial and alternative internment, which is going to be fascinating. And then after that, we're hoping to have a very wonderful and esteemed Vajrayana master speak. And then we have plans for next year. And we also have support groups. So there's a lot, including this manual, instructions for the Transitional State, which can be ordered through Vimala Treasures.org. And we hope that this will support our community. That's really what we want to do. Everyone, all we have a handful of volunteers, maybe 10, 10 or 12 at the most, and everybody is really aspiring to help, increase the quality of our lives and the integrity that we have as we pass.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to definitely include all of the information for TLC and including all the events on the website. I have a website too, and I'll list all that stuff that on there too. And yeah, I'll try to make sure that this goes up way before any of those events that you just mentioned happen. So, yeah, I'm just really grateful that you welcomed me into your home, and we're so open to sharing your experiences.
And we can talk again.
I hope so.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, this is.
I hope so too.
Yeah. This has been such a. I've learned so much just sitting here and listening. So I'm just really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. Please check out the QuakeCityPortal.com for more context and insight into some of the topics that we discuss into this episode. You can check out Julie Rogers at tlcserves.org. It's all listed in the show notes for you to look into if this is something that you're interested in and introducing to some of your loved ones or into your own life. I think this is a really important topic that we've discussed previously on this show. Please check out episode 24, I believe, with Stephanie Crawford, Death Doula. This is all kind of related into, this is why we do this show. It's to address topics like this that are important to me and to bring them to you if you're looking for it. So please check out the QuakeCityPortal.com. Check us out on YouTube. Just posted a video on there. And we'll be posting more in the months to come during the summer. And I think that's about it. I hope you guys are all enjoying your summer, and see you all down the road. Thanks for listening.